Here, as you might know, I'm a graduate of the University of Delaware, so a proud fighting blue hen. Always happy to be back in the first state. We're going to have the senator in. I'm going to have some questions for him. Then we're going to take some audience questions. We're going to try and talk about some topics that matter to you. Sound good? Yeah. Senator Chris Coons.
Good evening, everybody. Could you let's thank Matt O'Donnell for taking time out of his schedule to join us here as the moderator. Welcome home. Boy, that's a weird visual look. I have the biggest hands. I'm sorry. That's probably not appropriate. But I mean, look at that. It's like impressive, man. I'm sorry. We've got a number of elected officials I just want to welcome this evening. I think State Senator Tizzy Lockman is with us. We have three state representatives, Krista Griffiths, Larry Mitchell, and Frank Cook. Krista Griffiths, Frank Cook. I know we've got Larry Mitchell in the back. Thank you, Larry. Yolanda McCoy is with us, Councilwoman Yolanda McCoy. Sorry, Councilwoman Yolanda McCoy. And I think County Executive Matt Myers just joined us. Matt, you here? Thanks, Matt. And I want to also take a minute and thank Donna Wilson and President Mark Brainerd of Delaware Technical Community College. This is a great facility, and we appreciate the support and the help. So I also want to make sure, if you didn't see on the way in, we have a number of constituent services table available. We have a table from the Veterans Administration. So if this town hall is anything like the last three, we will have veterans issues and veterans questions. So we asked the VA to specifically send folks who are specialists. I've also got about a dozen people here who are staffers, either from my Washington, D.C. policy team or from my Delaware constituent services team. So we've got folks here tonight who work on everything from housing to veterans issues to Social Security to Medicare to Medicaid to immigration, so that if we get into specific issues where you say, I really want to talk to you about, and it's your specific case, I'm happy to hear it, but I also want to make sure that we get it into our system so we can help, so I can advocate for you. That really is the best part of the job. There are days that I really get a little down or a little frustrated by the gridlock and the difficulties in Washington. The thing that keeps me going is knowing that I've got a terrific team in Dover and Wilmington and Washington that advocate for you. I get a weekly report of all the different cases that we've been able to resolve or clear, or the ones that need a little extra push or need a call or need an email. I also get a summary of every phone call, every email, and every letter that comes in. So, if 83 people email me and say, if 83 people email me and say you're a dangerous idiot, I just get the usual, as a summary. But if 83 people email me and say, I'm concerned about climate change, I'll get climate change 83. But if one Delawarean emails or calls and says, I want to know your position on Senate Bill 263. There's thousands of bills. I don't know them by their numbers. And that's not something we've heard of before. In that weekly report, I get a summary of the bill. Am I already a co-sponsor or not? What's the issue, and when am I getting a memo on it? So, piped plovers on Cape Hatteras Beach. I got one person emailed me, and then I ran into him in Rockford Park, and he says, you answered my letter about the piped plovers on Cape Hatteras Beach. I said, yeah, I know, I remember that one. That's just doing my job. That's just trying to be responsive. Our goal as an office is, if you contact me and ask for an opinion or give me your opinion, we try to get a letter back out in 2 weeks. Because frankly, if it's 2 or 3 months, you've forgotten you sent me an email at that point. You've given up on ever hearing from me. So I try to be responsive. I recognize there's folks here tonight who don't like what I'm doing and don't agree with me and don't like the way I vote. And there's folks here who like what I'm doing and agree with me and like the way I vote. And there's probably the vast majority of folks here are a mix. You don't like everything, but you like some things. What I hope we're going to do this evening is find a way to listen to each other. To do what we don't do a lot of in Washington, frankly, but I try to, which is to respect each other and to find ways, if we are disagreeing, to at least not be disagreeable in doing so. One of the things that worries me more than anything else in our country right now is the ways that we seem to have a harder and harder time respecting people with different values and different ideas. Not everybody is happy about this, but I spend a lot of time trying to build real relationships with Republicans in the Senate and in the administration, because without it, no bill that I introduce is going anywhere. So I'm perfectly happy to introduce what I call my prophetic bills that I know aren't going anywhere in this Congress but are important. I just introduced a bill with 100 co-sponsors in the House and Senate to repeal the so-called Muslim travel ban. It's not getting signed into law in this administration, and I understand that. But I thought it was important, and we had 400 different advocacy organizations endorse it, to say a religiously based ban on coming into this country doesn't reflect the best in our traditions as a nation. But I recognize that's not popular with everybody, and I'm also clear that's not going to become law anytime soon. On the other hand, I worked with Pat Toomey, who's a senator from Pennsylvania, with whom I agree on relatively little, but we managed to get a bill on strengthening background checks for those who are already prohibited from having a gun. So if you're a convicted felon, if you're convicted, if you're mentally ill, if you're a domestic abuser, if you're a felon, you are in that class of people who are prohibited from owning firearms. And you go into a gun store in Delaware and you lie on the form. You check the box that says, yes, I am allowed to purchase a weapon. And the gun store owner says, just wait right here a minute, Mr. Coons. I'm going to go back here. And they run you through the NICS system. They come back and they say, ooh, the 5 years you spent in the federal pen for armed robbery, not so good. We're really sorry we're not selling you a gun today. In Pennsylvania, law enforcement knows that immediately. In Delaware, nobody gets told this. There's 32 states where nobody gets told. And there's a dozen states where, in Pennsylvania, because the state police do the background check, they connect to the FBI. They're then able to call township police or city police or the state police and say, you might want to know that Chris Coons is out there trying to buy a gun, because it's usually a very good predictor I'm trying to go do something I shouldn't be doing. Pat Toomey and I introduced that bill together in the last Congress. It just passed the House. It is in a package that I'm hopeful will get passed this year into law, and I think that's worth doing. So anyway, I'm talking too long at the beginning. Let me stop here and simply say thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your lives. Thank you for it's Friday evening. I don't know how we ended up scheduling on a Friday evening other than right. But if this town hall is anything like the ones I've just done in Cheswold and in Georgetown and in Delaware City, we've got a lot of folks with opinions and questions. I'm thrilled Matt's here to start by, because he's a trained professional, to ask me some tough journalist questions. But then we're looking forward to hearing your questions. And if you've got specific things, I just would be grateful if you'd say it concisely, say who you are, where you're from, and give us a context. And Matt's going to be calling on folks after he asks me a couple of tough, quick questions first. Thank you all for coming out this evening.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, everyone. Senator Coons periodically appears on our program on Sunday mornings called Inside Story, and the interview time is 5 minutes, and so we have to cram in hours worth of information and study and talk into just a few moments, and it doesn't give me the opportunity to say, Senator Coons, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Matt. Thank you.
It was a wonderful day. I'm doing great. I was driving through Wilmington. I saw the trees are all blooming. Spring is here. Had a little rain, but it was nice because it's make the flowers are going to grow, so everything's good. Good times. Anyone hit a pothole on the way over here? Me too. So some truly believe the roads couldn't be any worse than they've been in our lifetimes. And this is not only interstates, but the local roads and everything. And of course, the federal government is responsible for maintaining these things, and obviously that's not necessarily happening. You had a hearing with Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao last month, and you asked if the Trump administration would try to fund an infrastructure plan by increasing the federal gas tax or charging more fees on airline tickets. Now, it's all good to get these potholes fixed, but would the men and women here have to pay more in gas or get charged more for airline tickets to get that funded?
Thanks, Matt. My question to Secretary Chao was, we have literally billions and billions of dollars of unfunded repairs and upgrades. The bridges and tunnels and roads and airports of this country were overwhelmingly built 30 and 40 years ago, and we are living off of the received infrastructure that a generation before us paid for and built. And we haven't invested in keeping it up to date. The last time we did a big bipartisan transportation bill, it wasn't paid for. We literally just took money out of the Treasury. We printed more money. It's never been done before. If a developing country did it, the IMF would kick them out. I mean, Tom Carper voted against that transportation bill because he thought it was so outrageous. There were some really good things in it. We need to get stuff built. But frankly, we've got a Congress that's refusing to step up to the plate and say, how are we going to pay for it? A gas tax is a user fee. You're only paying a gas tax when you're buying gas to drive your car on the road, and it's a tax that builds the roads. I support raising the federal gas tax. It hasn't been raised since 1994. And we are driving, because of the increased efficiency of vehicles, even though we're driving more miles, we're getting less dollars in recent years. The Philadelphia airport could use an upgrade. We haven't increased, there's a small surcharge on every passenger ticket that's supposed to go to facilities. I will tell you the thing that gave me the sharpest insight into this was the last trip I got to take with Senator John McCain. We went to Hanoi. The thing that surprised me the most about Hanoi was the airport. It's gorgeous, brand new, like something out of a science fiction movie. I don't think there's, and you know, I expected to have a moving and emotional and challenging visit with John to the prison where he was a prisoner of war. I expected to have some challenging meetings with, you know, the heads of the Vietnamese Communist Party with huge statues of Mao behind them and big one-star flags and stuff. It was a powerful trip. But the one thing I did not expect was to get off the plane and look around and go, wow, I've never seen an airport like this. That's the case in dozens of countries around the world where the Chinese are funding state-of-the-art infrastructure. Our infrastructure is breaking down. I drive on roads full of potholes. I take the train that breaks down and goes slowly. I fly out of airports that have, you know, holes in the ceiling and water and flight delays. I didn't realize just how behind we were until I took a couple trips and saw how much better the infrastructure is in Italy and in France, in Vietnam and in China. And frankly, I think we are way overdue to invest in ourselves. And I know it's not popular. I know there'll be people who'll be ticked at me for saying it. That's why most senators and congressmen won't vote for it. But I see no other way out of this. We got to pay to rebuild our country.
The proposals from the Democratic presidential candidates that seem to get the most attention are the ones that are the most liberal ones. For one is the Green New Deal. And for those who don't know exactly what it is, I know you've probably heard about it many times. This seeks to phase out fossil fuels and attain net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, about 10 years from now. Republicans, as you know, in the Senate held what some are calling a show vote, just to embarrass Democrats, which ended in the Green New Deal's defeat. Do you support the Green New Deal?
I support bold ideas and strong action to combat climate change. Climate change is the greatest existential threat to our society and to our planet. We're not applauding climate change, but we're applauding that we need to do something about it. Senator Carper introduced a resolution at the same time the Green New Deal came up to ask whether or not everybody in the Senate agrees that it's real, meaning it's happening, that it's caused by humans, and that we should do something about it. You've got about an equal division between the parties, roughly. You've got most Democrats who want to do something bold, and you've got most Republicans who are saying not until every other country signs on to a way that binds them. And many disagree that it's even caused by humans. If you have read the Green New Deal, you know it's not a law, it's a resolution. It's a statement of principles. It's an aspiration. It is not enactable. It is not practical. It is not real. I am a co-sponsor of several bipartisan bills that would take bold action to finance renewable energy research, development, deployment, and financing. I think it's incumbent, I think the Democratic Party owes Middle America an answer to the question, so you believe it's real? Yes, we do. So you believe it's important and difficult? Yes, we do. What are you actually going to do about it? We're not going to eliminate all fossil fuels in 10 years. There's no There is no credible path towards our eliminating fossil fuels in 30 years. It would fundamentally transform our society in ways that are difficult to even imagine. But we can achieve our Paris climate change goals. We can significantly reduce our emissions. We can invent new technologies that we export to China and India that help them reduce their reliance on coal. And we can do things that'll create new jobs and new opportunities in this country. But we're not going to do it by having show votes on proposals that aren't even laws, that are just resolutions. So frankly, what I get busy trying to do is to pass laws. I have a bill that is co-sponsored by the Republican chairman of the Energy Committee, Lisa Murkowski, that if passed would dramatically increase investment in renewable energy in this country. It's had a hearing, it's had a score, it's had a, I'm sorry, these are inside the Capitol ways of saying it's a real bill. If passed, it could be signed into law and take effect the next day. That's not what the Green New Deal is. It's a resolution. If it were passed, it would do nothing. It's simply a speech. It's an idea. It's a dream. We need actual bills that can become law, and we need an administration that takes climate change seriously, and we need a country that can see a plan that doesn't rely on getting rid of entire industries or whole ways of life, but invests in inventing new solutions for this century that makes us more competitive and creates new jobs and new opportunity.
I'm sure you've been to Target, Walmart. Yeah, Walmart's here in Delaware as well. Target is raising its minimum wage for its workers to $13 per hour in June. Walmart already raised its pay to $11 an hour last year. Both retailers, as you can imagine, probably did this because there is a big public movement to raise the federal minimum wage, or at least the state minimum wages. Wouldn't you, Senator, rather see the minimum wages be raised organically, and that businesses step up for it, rather than the government telling every single individual business how much they need to pay their workers?
I support a strong federal minimum wage. I do think it's important that we not jump the federal minimum wage in one dramatic move and then not raise it for 10 or 12 or 15 years and then jump it in another dramatic move. The biggest weakness in the federal minimum wage is it doesn't have an escalator. So it doesn't go up with the price of living. So it'll be $3 and it'll stay at $3 for 10 or 12 or 15 years, and then we'll raise it to $7 and then it'll stay there for 10 or 12 or 15 years. And then we're fighting now over raising it to 15 because it hasn't been raised in so long. If it just went up 2 or 3% a year, it would really stay competitive with the slow growth in the cost of living and the economy, and we wouldn't have these fights over a step function. The other thing that's worth paying some attention to is the tip wage. How many of you have worked for tips at some point in your life, right? Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses, right? We've got a lot of people in this country who are living on the tip wage, which is a tiny fraction of the minimum wage. It's a third. And we got an awful lot of people who are kind and thoughtful tippers, and we got people who don't tip at all. That also has not gone up in years. So I think there's three components. We need a stronger federal minimum wage, but frankly, more than the specific dollar amount, we need an escalator. And we need to pay attention to the tip wage because there are way too many working families that are trying to get by on the minimum wage. Last thing, how you view the minimum wage depends on who you think is living on it. Do you think the minimum wage is high school kids living at home, having their first job at McDonald's, and they don't really need to make a ton of money, they're learning how to work? Or do you think who's making the minimum wage is a single parent trying to raise 2 kids and has to work 2 full-time jobs to even put food on the table? It is more the latter than the former in this economy. But we need to figure out ways to make them both work, to not lose jobs by having a minimum wage that's so high that folks just move to technology instead of training, but to still make sure people who work full-time in this country should not be in poverty. You should be able to work full-time in this country and support yourself. And if we don't have a wage that's high enough that someone who works full-time can have a decent house and feed themselves, then there's something wrong with how this works. And the Earned Income Tax Credit has been the only way out of poverty for millions of Americans who work. At the end of the day, I think work is one of the most important things to keep our society going, and the opportunity for meaningful work that pays well is one of the most important things we can do. There was this guy named Walter Mondale. He was a Democrat a long time ago. or is it Hubert Humphrey? I'm quoting Hubert Humphrey, who said, "You cannot love the working man and not worry about the man for whom he's going to work." Sort of an outdated quote, I know. But you can't worry about working families and not also worry about where are the jobs and how are we going to get good jobs that you can actually raise a family on. So that was a long-winded answer to a short question. I'm sorry, man.
Not surprising. I'm kidding. Senator, armed constables greet students at every building in the Capital School District in Dover. Maybe some of you are from the Dover area and traveled up here as a way to deter school shootings. Senators should, first of all, are you comfortable with trained officers being armed and protecting students in schools? Are you comfortable with teachers being trained to do this? Do you think every school in the nation needs to have this to deter school shootings?
Yes, no, no. Three more sentences. We have a generation of children who are growing up in fear with active shooter drills, who are learning that one of the most dangerous places they can be is school. We already put so much on teachers. We expect teachers to deal with every single issue in our society, to also expect them to be trained in the safe, reliable, successful use of firearms in a complex situation is to ask a lot. Police officers whose careers and lives depend on shooting accurately in those rare circumstances, very rare circumstances where they must unholster and use a gun, they don't hit their targets more than a third of the time. And that's someone whose job it is and who's fully trained. Why on earth would we put this on teachers to have them carry sidearms? We have bigger problems in our society. This is one of the most frustrating areas to me that we haven't been able to come together and solve, that we've got so many kids in our country going through these drills and afraid that at some point someone's going to kick down a door and shoot up the school. We have had church shootings, we've had school shootings, we've had mosque shootings, we've had nightclub shootings. The Second Amendment is a fundamental American right and must be respected and protected. But we've also got to figure out better ways to protect the innocence of houses of worship, of places we recreate, and of where our children learn. We have got to, that's a hard challenge, but we have got to figure this out in this country.
Senator, are your fellow Democrats too worried about what is contained in the Mueller report?
Should I just say yes and move on? It is a good thing for our country that Robert Mueller has concluded that President Trump did not conspire with a hostile power to win the 2016 election. And we should recognize that. That's a good thing. Would you rather have found that our president literally committed treason? You can't be happy in that outcome. Am I convinced that Bill Barr has played it absolutely straight and did not send us a skewed summary? No, I'm not convinced. And I look forward to getting the full report. I think all of us should wait till we've got the full report. Look, there were a lot of reasons to be concerned that Bob Mueller, a lifelong federal career law enforcement leader who was the second longest serving FBI director, a decorated Marine Corps veteran of the Vietnam War, and a very admirable man. Like, there were a lot of reasons to think he wasn't going to be able to finish this investigation, like daily attacks on his character and calling it a witch hunt. He finished. That's great. That's a good thing for the rule of law. I worked with Lindsey Graham and Tom Tillis and Cory Booker to write, introduce, get a markup on a bill to protect the investigation. It's over. So now let's get the report and find out what it really says and see whether or not the information about obstruction deserves more attention. But in closing, here's my gut. Most of you want to know what we're doing about opioids and heroin, prescription drug prices, trying to make schools better, roads safer, and keep us out of more wars, and immigration. And the Mueller report, it's important, it's great, but I got to tell you, it is not the be-all and end-all. It's a good thing the investigation got to complete. Now we'll see what's in it.
I have a few more questions, Senator, and then I'd like to get the questions from the audience, if I could. Facebook, Google. just to name a few. Do you think these companies hold way too much power and they need to be regulated further?
Yes.
How about the idea of finding ways to pass legislation to protect people's data? And I'm talking about right now, if you have a cell phone in your pocket, these companies probably know where you are, where you've been, and what you bought today. And they may use that to combine things and to predict what you may do next. And some people may be creeped out about that.
So that's what Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina and I have talked. That's the phone message I was listening to. Lindsey Graham is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, as some of you may know. He's a Republican from South Carolina. We created a new subcommittee. It's the Intellectual Property Subcommittee. Senator Tillis of North Carolina is the chairman. I'm the ranking member. I'm a geek. I love talking about patent policy and trade. I mean, this is Delaware, you know. I grew up around a bunch of DuPont chemists. Tillis and I are going to be working with a group of 6 senators, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, on privacy policy. It is a complex area. People's expectations are all over the map. But, as Matt just said, these companies know more about you than you know about yourself, almost. There's an airline that's about to roll out a facial recognition terminal where from the minute you walk in to the minute you get on the plane, you don't have to show them anything. They've got a camera that just scans your face, so you walk up to the gate and they say, "Hello, Veronica, welcome to flight 112. And you're like, don't you need, nope. I see here you're in seat 112, and oh, you're 136 pounds, and your blood pressure is 120/80, and you like clam chowder, and you've recently bought flowers for someone online." I mean, it's insane how much stores know about you as you walk through them, how much these data collecting engines know about us, some of it willingly that we put, you know, that we feed them, and some of it just by where you go. We recently had a hearing where several of us, Republicans and Democrats, asked the same question of the CEO of the company responsible for the Android operating system. Even when you take the SIM card out, even when you turn it off, it continues to send pings back every few seconds that say exactly where you are, meaning what floor you're on and where in the building you are and how quickly you're moving. And it doesn't take a whole lot today. It takes a huge amount of artificial intelligence, but it is easy with that information about you to figure out, are you HIV positive? Are you gay or straight? Are you young or old? Are you newly pregnant or newly divorced? If you can put together exactly where you are at every minute, you can figure out what kind of doctor you're going to, what kind of church or mosque or synagogue you go to, what kind of counseling or consulting services you go to, whether or not you went to a clinic. I mean, right? And it's already happening that you get ads pushed at you. Have you noticed this? That you'll go on Google, not to pick a particular name, but you'll go on Google, hi Google, and you just had a conversation with a friend about, who won the 47 World Series or something, and you just type in baseball and up comes 47 World Series. And you think, I didn't tell you that. You're listening to my conversations. The news just came out yesterday that, yeah, Alexa really does have whole teams of human beings who are actually transcribing to try and improve the quality of the algorithm. But we need to legislate in a way that respects the creativity and the innovation and the competitiveness that we get out of having the world's leading businesses. Is there anybody here who doesn't use either Facebook or Google at all? Totally disconnected? Right? How many of you use Facebook or Google on a daily basis in some way? Right? If we shut these things down completely or broke them up or prevented them from using your data, you'd be surprised at the things you've come to expect that would no longer be immediately available. But they are using your data in ways that could only be described, Matt's word was creepy, and we don't know about it, and we aren't asked permission for it. So we got to figure out a way to retain some of the competitiveness and innovation of the American economy. We're the country that gave birth to all these things for a reason. but that also respects the fact that one person's, I'd like to give you access to new credit services, is another person's redlining. One person's, I'd like to help you understand your genealogy and your family, is another person's, I'd like to discriminate against you based on your being LGBTQ. So just given what we know about human nature and past practices and issues in our country, I think we need to have some mechanism, some process that creates sort of a duty on the part of the companies that have rivers of data about us to do no harm to us, to not discriminate against us based on our data, and to give us the ability to take it back if we want to, and to give us the ability to port it. If you decide, if someone came up with a platform that was a competitor to Facebook, what about all those pictures? What about all those entries? What about all those friends you've got? Right now, you'd lose them. So you're not going to move from Facebook to another platform. In Europe, they have a new standard that says you have to be able to port your data. So if you've got all your online banking stuff at PNC, you're able to move it to WSFS. If you've got all your music on, iTunes, you can move it to Spotify. Right now, that is not a feature of the American system, but we're actively debating whether it should be. I have kids who are teenagers. They have a very different sense of privacy than I do. I think one of the most fundamental things about being an American is what I call the right to be weird. It's the right to have unpopular ideas. It's the right to have interests and hobbies that, maybe your neighbors don't like or think about. And I just dislike the idea that we've got systems that can know absolutely everything about us, and that we have a competitor in China that has already launched their social credit system. If you don't know about China's social credit system, I'd urge you to take a look, because it's how they're controlling their population. They let you know. It's not just a credit score, it's a life score. If you want a better apartment, you want your kid to be able to go to college, you'd like a better job, you'd like to get to see a good doctor, they are literally measuring whether you post things online that are critical of the government, whether you jaywalk, whether you pay your bills on time, whether you have unpopular opinions. And they put it all into one great big pot. So when you go in and apply for that new job and you don't get it, you don't know whether you didn't get it because your son posted something online that was critical of the great leader. But when you try to get a new apartment, you don't get it, new job, you don't get it, and better doctor, you don't get it, and then someone knocks on your door and says, by the way, your son has some very unfortunate opinions, you might want to talk to him, then you know. That is happening right now, and they are exporting it to other countries. We need to confront this and deal with it, because it's not the world we live in and we want to live in, and it's got real consequences. The speed with which this is changing and moving. So anyway, it was a long speech. I apologize, man. See, I keep trying to give you one-word answers. Do I think we should regulate data? Yes. But I think you have to tell us how to do this, because it is the golden goose. I mean, we've created huge amounts of wealth and opportunity with these amazing companies, but they have rivers of data on all of us. And what I see in some other places on earth where the government has control of that data, I really, really don't like that. I don't feel comfortable with that. And Google and Facebook know more about you than the FBI or the NSA ever will. And at some point, I don't like that either. Okay, thanks.
A tech writer once wrote that privacy is important to people until it means giving up their vanity. One more question. Your friend, former Vice President Joe Biden, hasn't officially gotten into the presidential race, but many expect him to. He's had a couple of bad weeks. Some people believe he has an intimacy problem. At the same time, he is leading most polls amongst all the candidates, whether they're declared or not. Does that surprise you about how his polling numbers are still really good, and do you feel that he has properly addressed these so-called intimacy problems?
I think Joe said as clearly as he could that he gets that there are different expectations, that he will do better at respecting people's space, but I believe him that he has not a mean bone in his body, that he's the kind of person who hugs and who comforts and who engages and touches men and women in ways that are non-sexual. They're very personal and up close. But as someone who has benefited immensely from his encouragement and comfort as my own father was dying, I'll tell you, I think he has encouraged and lifted up a lot of people at a lot of tough moments. But we are also a different country in terms of our expectations today than we were years or decades ago. And I think time will tell whether he's able to demonstrate a different approach. He loves people, and he tends to sort of dive into a crowd and, you know, I mean, I've had him put his forehead right here and be talking to me right here, you know. It is a little different. But, you know, literally, my election night in 2000, he put two hands on my shoulder, pulled me in, gave me, right? He's a very close space person. Here's what I believe about Joe. He knows what it means to get knocked down. He's had some tough knocks in his life. So have almost all of us. At some point, something has happened in your life that took your breath away, that just made you wonder how you were going to get up the next day, how you were going to get back to work, how you were ever going to live again, having lost your child, your home, your job, your hope, your future. We got a lot of people in this country who've had the crap kicked out of them by something. And Joe knows what it's like to still get up and still get back to work and still get back to caring about other people and move forward. And I have an enormous amount of respect for that.
Thank you, Senator. I have about 50 more questions, but I don't want to take up all the time. We'd like to get some questions from the audience. If you could raise your hand, and also when we call on you, we'd love for you to give us your name and where you live. Let's get you right over here.
Coons. Hi, it's nice to see you in person. I watch Teresa Weller. I watch you every morning.
Thank you.
And I have a light-hearted question and a very serious question. On a light note, Senator Coons, I wonder if you recall the people from 15 plus years ago that worked so hard, effortlessly, like myself and Phil Burke, to help get you to where you are. I know you to be a great man. Congratulations on your success. I hope you keep going further, and I will spread the news about what a wonderful man you always have been.
Thank you, Chief.
My serious question to you is this. I live on Beach Avenue in 19805. Now, there are several beach avenues in 19805. Mine is Ellesmere, but it is 1 mile from Wilmington, so they are often transposed. Every day, I get other people's mail as well as their postal packages and so forth, and they get mine. We have tried desperately with petitions, addressed the post office. This has been going on not for months, but for years, and I think it needs some further attention. Bear with me. My greatest concern in regards to this particular situation would be, bear with me please.
It's okay, Teresa.
I am disabled, as you can see. I take 10 pills a day for anxiety and seizures. I am trying to get new knee replacements and having difficulty because I'm not 60. However, my concern is, and this has occurred, and you can research it, should I need emergency assistance such as the police or an ambulance and call 911, they have gone to the wrong Beach Avenue because there are too many. One is only 1.5 miles away. Some are further, but there are too many. Wilmington, Ellesmere, Beach Avenue, 19805. They all are the same.
Senator, is there a solution to this?
Yes.
Can you
Teresa, thank
please
you for sharing that story. Thanks for your determination about this. Erica's just given you Tyler Rivera's card. Tyler's a constituent advocate in my office who interfaces with the post office. When it comes to 911 dispatch, that's a county function. We have a county dispatch center. In the city of Wilmington, there is a city dispatch center. But the county dispatch center, you can call, and I'll talk to Tyler about this. You can call and get a special record put in with your name and your address. And let me talk through this with dispatch and make sure I remember this correctly, because I haven't been county executive in 10 years almost. But people who have a specific concern, and I know we have our current county executive here, and I can see he's taking notes on this. People who've got a particular concern. You know, I have an I'm saying this hypothetically, I have an aged parent who is prone to collapsing, has fainting spells, and forgets his medication if left home alone. You can call dispatch and give them specifics on a specific address, a specific person, and to encourage information about the response. That resides with an address. Your concern, understandably, is that you call in and say, I'm Teresa, I'm at Beach Avenue in Ellesmere, I need a ambulance right now. But it might not be you calling in. It might be someone else in your family, or it might be a neighbor calling in, and they send the ambulance or the paramedics to a different Beach Avenue, and by 8 or 10 or 15 minutes, they miss coming to you. Matt, do you think we could work together on addressing this in some way? And do you have an answer? Because I can see you gesturing. Yeah, no.
Please.
Please. This, it will automatically come on. We all know we don't need a street named after me. We were at County Councilman Jay Street had a block named for him earlier today that we were at, thus the joke.
Thank you for your question.
There's too many places in our community and in our country where you've got a name with the street with the same name in 4 places. In suburban Washington, there is a Glebe Road in 4 different places that are half an hour apart. Why do I know this? Because I had an appointment on a Glebe Road. First year I was a senator, and I was 45 minutes away from where I was supposed to be on the phone. Where the heck are you? And in some life or death situations, it's no laughing matter. So I'm happy to follow up with Matt, with you, and to have Tyler involved and see whether a street renaming or work with the post office. I saw a lot of heads nodding about getting your mail delivered other places. I've had an unexpected friendship for years in my old neighborhood because we had one house where just year after year after year, they got our Christmas and birthday packages and cards, and we got theirs, and it worked out okay. But you'd really rather just get your own mail and not have other people opening it. So let's see if we can get to work on that.
I look forward to getting actual mail rather than email, because email, is just junk, right? I think there was a question right over here, sir. And could you state your name and where you're from, please?
My name is Adnan Zafar. I live in Wilmington. So, Senator Coons, first of all, I'm going to talk about a bill that's in the Senate and in the Congress called the Fairness for High-Skilled Immigrants Act. But before I address that, I just wanted to let everybody know, talking about responsiveness, I have been chasing you for all the town halls that you have been doing in Cheswold,
Yep.
in Georgetown, and then here as well. So I talked about this issue in Cheswold, and somehow your staffers got note of it. And after I visited you in Georgetown,
You handed me a copy, and I gave it to one of them. Yes.
and I'm just really happy to tell everybody over here that you actually co-sponsored the bill as well.
Yes.
I'm 1 in 1 million residents, and I'm going to talk about an immigration issue, so I will tell you that I'm not a citizen or a permanent resident, and you responded so quickly and you actually co-sponsored the bill, so I'm extremely thankful for that. So Senator Coons, you co-sponsored the bill. It is a bipartisan bill. On the House side, we have 259 co-sponsors as of today, and on the Senate side, we have 27 co-sponsors as of today. There are 14 Republicans who are co-sponsoring the bill, and 13 Democrats who have co-sponsored the bill as of now. Senator Mike Lee is the lead sponsor of the bill. Senator Coons, last session of Congress, the same exact bill had 330 co-sponsors on the House side and 20 co-sponsors on the Senate side. And talking about gridlock, it really frustrates me that a popular bill such as this has not yet passed. So I just wanted to ask you 2 questions. The first is, what can we do as constituents to make sure that a good bill that is bipartisan supported can actually pass through Congress? And the second question is, what can you do for us to make sure that a bill such as this passes through Congress as well? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. There are a number of bills relating to important issues, whether it's gun safety or education or clean water or immigration, that never quite get through. In 2013, on the Judiciary Committee on which I serve, we spent months and months working through a comprehensive immigration reform bill. We had 3 weeks of markups on Judiciary Committee. We voted on over 100 amendments. 9 of them were mine. And it ultimately passed the Senate by a nearly 2/3 majority, a strong bipartisan majority. It was never taken up in the House. Senator Schumer and President Trump had a conversation last week about some of the very divisive issues about the border security, refugees, immigration reform, the status of Dreamers. And the president asked Senator Schumer, who was one of the key authors of that bill, who said, we've got a bill that's been supported by business. It would deal with farm community issues. It would deal with high-skilled, with low-skilled, with, border security, huge amount of investment in border security, $40 billion. The president said, send it over to me, I'll look at it. Until we can come to an agreement between the president, the House, and the Senate on some of the most divisive issues we have, we can pass legislation, but he won't sign it. Or we can present him with compromises, and he will reject them. The last bill that Senator McCain and I introduced together was a copy of a bipartisan bill in the House. Will Hurd, some of you might have seen a Republican Congressman, Will Hurd, on television. He was a CIA officer. He represents the El Paso area. He has more of the U.S.-Mexico border in his district than any other House member. Will teamed up with a Democrat in the House, and they got 56 co-sponsors, equal Republican-Democrat. John McCain, although not physically in the Senate, he was very ill at that point, called me and asked if I'd join with him and introduce it in the Senate. We ultimately got 52 votes. We had 4 immigration bills voted on the floor on one day. You may remember this day. The only thing that got 60 votes was the bill President Trump was actively lobbying for. It got 60 no votes. The conclusion from that should be the vision that Stephen Miller, his immigration aide, is pushing of cracking down on immigration with no relief and no sort of positive trade-off isn't going to get through the Senate. Not now, probably not ever. And some compromise bill is what we should be shooting for. We have millions of Americans with uncertain status. I think we need to secure our border. I think we need to make it clear that people who are here without status, who commit further crimes, are going to be sent home or sent away from our country. But people who are here, who are contributing to our country, who are working and paying taxes and part of our community, need to have a pathway towards being here legally. And every employer I've met with from Delaware, from folks at the beach to folks in Wilmington, from the university and tech to hospitality and hospitals, is saying they can't find and hire enough good people. We need immigration. There is no way for our economy and our country to grow without immigration. But we need a legal immigration system where employers verify the immigration status of their employees, where we know when people come here on a visa that they leave. 40% of those who are here illegally did not cross some border. Well, they did, but it was in the air. They landed and they just never left. They were on a student visa or a visitor's visa. There's stuff that, I mean, this is not sharply partisan stuff. We shut down, I'll be blunt, President Trump shut down big chunks of the government of the United States for 35 days in a disagreement over fence versus wall. And ultimately, you know, he's going to build more fence. Okay. Let's fix the big stuff. We haven't figured out how to pay for our entitlement programs or how to fix our roads. Like, to me, this is exactly the sort of area where we ought to be able to sit down in a room and say, this is a country built by immigrants. We need to control our border. We need to increase legal immigration, and we need to have a process for resolving these issues. We need people with skills and talents from around the world to come here. And we need to grow our country. It's just not that hard. It's maddening. Your question was, what can we do as citizens and what can you do as a senator? What I can do as a senator is not give up. After that terrible day a year and a half ago almost now, where like the bill that I'd worked on for months, I was almost in tears calling John McCain, who was dying at that point, to tell him that I failed, that our bill didn't make it. I so wanted to get that bill done for John. And it would have been easy to walk away and say, okay, forget it. I'm going to go work on something more fun. James Lankford and Tom Tillis and Maggie Hassan and I, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, we have kept meeting every few weeks ever since. What about this idea? What about this idea? I don't like that. What about this idea? Erica can give me an amen in the back. She's my chief counsel. She's not just good with the microphone. She's actually the top-ranked lawyer in my office. We have worked tirelessly on this. So what can I do? Not give up. Not give up. What can you do? Don't give up. Thank you for showing up at my town halls. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you, sir. Lady in the back there, please. You state your name. Yes, you in the green. State your name and where you're from, please.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Nicastro. I live in the Wilmington area also. And I just want to say that Senator Coons, you addressed a few things that I agreed with regards to the immigration, where it is that people overstay there when they have like a student visa or a visitor's visa and they overstay their welcome. I originally came from Trinidad, so I've been here almost like 3 years, and I did it the legal way, where it is that, you know, this country is based on laws, and I follow the law by the book. So my thing is that right now, when I first came in, I had a temporary visa, which expired, but I went through the process to get a permanent green card. And at the moment, last year I went to the biometrics, had that done, and I'm still waiting on my green card. And when I spoke to my immigration attorney, he mentioned to me that it's in the process and they have like issues where they're understaffed because of the fact that you know, they can't fill the position. So right now, I just have a letter stating that I have the 1.5-year extension, but I mean, if something happens, say like if I had to go back home and my mom is dying or something like that, I want to guarantee that I have that green card that allows me to come back in the country, because next thing you know, when you go to the airport, you may forget something, and I might forget that letter. So I don't want any issues. So when I come back to the country, that they say, well, you can't come back because you have that. So I would like to know, and just to point out that I've already reached out to your office. I spoke to Desiree, who was helpful. She said she will look into it, but I would also like for you to also not just look into it, but also to help me to get my permanent green card. So if you could just address that matter, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. You know, we want a country where people who play by the rules, who come here legally, who, you know, go through the process, who apply, are able to stay here and to contribute and to join our country. I will talk to Desiree about it. We will do our best. They are understaffed. They are overextended. They are under a lot of pressure. The guy who is the new head of Homeland Security is someone I know personally, and I know he's got a huge job, and there's been immense turnover in that department recently at its senior levels. You are right to have concerns about leaving the country to go home to visit family and then come back to this home. So let us work with you to try and expedite the issuance. We just handled a case just 2 weeks ago of someone who had a green card, had, you know, permanent legal status here, but misplaced the relevant document, could not get it reissued, had a family member die, and was unable to go home to pay their respects because they weren't certain they could get back into this country. You shouldn't be in that situation. If you've played by the rules, we ought to be able to work to get you issued the physical card that allows you to exit and re-enter. So thank you for raising that. I'm glad Desiree got back to you. Desiree Bird is my immigration assistant, the longest serving person in my office. I can't believe how much patience and enthusiasm she has. She loves helping people, so let us help. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Quick questions in between some of these Q&As.
Oh, sure.
What was the most wasteful thing you've ever seen with the federal government?
Oh, God. You know, I don't want to be misunderstood on this because it was a critical part of us winning the Second World War. But we had an energy appropriations hearing the other day. Anybody ever heard of Hanford Nuclear Waste Site? Okay. We got an estimate from the Secretary of Energy of how much it's going to cost to clean that up that left the entire committee just slack-jawed. If I remember correctly, it was between $350 and $500 billion. And we all looked at each other and went, what? You didn't mean 3 billion. You didn't mean 5 billion. You didn't mean 50. We've already spent tens of billions of dollars on. It is tank after tank after tank of the slurry and complex chemical waste that is left over from the very, very early stages of our nation's nuclear weapons program. I don't mean to describe it as waste because it was critical to our national security, but it strikes me as an insane waste of hundreds of billions of dollars that we haven't stabilized and resolved something that we've known is a problem for 50 years.
Sounds like it would have been really clean, though, if you spent that amount of money.
Really clean. I'll give you one other.
Sure.
I probably
Go ahead,
should not wander into this one. Yucca Mountain. Anybody know what Yucca Mountain is? It's our nuclear waste repository in Nevada. It's been sitting there. It is a hole in the ground that's been sitting there for decades. We either need to use it or move on to another site. We need to have an up or down, like let's look at it, let's assess it, and let's move on. But we've got nuclear waste sitting in casks at sites all over the United States. They should be in a geologically safe, they should be in places that are more geologically stable and less unsafe than the edge of the Delaware Bay, like the nuclear power plant right over here. I'm not saying that that's unsafe. I'm just saying it makes me uncomfortable. And I'd really rather know that our nuclear waste is in places that on a 10 or 20,000 year horizon is not expected to have any issues.
Question over here. You, sir?
Sir.
Paul Johnson, Chicago.
Yep.
My question is also on immigration. We have a crisis on the border, and right now our border patrol is retaining hundreds and thousands a day, and our facilities can't handle it. But somebody is stopping them from putting them back over the border right away. Why can't we just send them right back, which will alleviate some of the crowding in our facilities?
It depends. I'm going to try and give you the best answer I can, and Erica will correct me if I get pieces of this wrong. After the Second World War, the world came together and looked at something that happened, where the Nazis, it was pretty predictable they were killing Jews in large numbers, and shiploads full of Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany, came to the United States, floated up and down off the East Coast for months, and were not allowed to land in the United States or in any of a half dozen other countries. And ultimately were forced to go back to Germany, and a majority of them were killed. And there was a UN convention signed on what happens when someone comes to your country with a credible fear of persecution if forced back to their country of origin. There are big disputes over, well, what's the credible fear of persecution in Mexico? Your credible fear of persecution for the vast majority of the people currently presenting on our southern border is in is in El Salvador, is in Honduras, is in Guatemala. So there is one set of issues that are around people who are seeking asylum. There's another set of issues around people who are crossing the border illegally but have no credible fear of persecution or just seeking economic opportunity. My understanding is there are relatively few limits on our ability to immediately repatriate people who come into our country, who don't have any relevant identification, who are not making an asylum claim. Where this gets particularly difficult is when there's children involved. So a parent comes across the border with 2 children, says, I came all the way from Honduras, where a drug gang killed his brother and put his sister into sexual slavery, and I took my 2 remaining kids, and we fled 1,000 miles. Here we are. What do we do with them? Under our own law and an international treaty, we cannot simply say, tough luck, and shove them back across the border to Mexico. They have to have a hearing in front of a judge. They have to have a hearing in front of a judge. Under a decision known by the name of Flores, we cannot keep that family, particularly with children, in detention for months and months and months. In 20 days, they have to be released internally with some plan for how to get them to come back for the hearing. And because of a lack of immigration judges and a very big backlog, it could be 2 or 3 years before the hearing. Right. It seems to me like there's things on both sides that we ought to be able to give. We ought to hire more immigration judges. Wait, I mean, right? It shouldn't take 3 years to get a hearing. We ought to provide better, more timely legal advice, judges, and appropriate facilities that can handle families. I don't think the answer is to separate parents from their children, move them hundreds of miles apart, and detain them indefinitely. But we have a real challenge in that the number of people coming across the border is far exceeding our capacity to detain them, to process them, and then to move them. I don't think we have done enough to explore non-detention alternatives, ankle bracelets, individual case monitoring. I've had vigorous arguments with Secretary Nielsen about the evidence about what works and what doesn't. I know she's gone, but now I'll be arguing with Kevin McLennan. But I think there are some examples that show that for much less cost, you can actually monitor people without having to keep them in a very expensive detention facility for very long periods of time and separating them from their children. But frankly, folks, we ought to be processing asylum claims in Guatemala, in Honduras, and in El Salvador. We ought to be opening up our embassies and saying, if you want to apply for asylum, here's the first place you ought to go. We ought to be working more closely with Mexico to say, your southern border is where people ought to be stopped, not our southern border. And we ought to be investing more in transparent and accountable ways that have a positive impact on stabilizing El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, which are among the most violent and corrupt countries on earth. You wouldn't take your kids on a 1,000 or 2,000 mile journey at enormous expense and danger if your home country wasn't an incredibly bad place. So, now, to be fair, my Republican colleagues with whom I've just had these arguments in the last 2 weeks say the money that's being spent in these 3 countries isn't very effective and it's largely being wasted. Okay, let's have some oversight hearings. Let's look at what is working and what's not working. 20 years ago, Colombia was an absolute basket case, just torn apart by drug gangs and guerrillas and conflict, and today is dramatically less unstable, notice my choice of words, and is closer to being a country that has elections, that has courts, that where just random murders on the street are not daily occurrences. They had most of their Supreme Court executed at one point by drug gangs. I mean, Colombia was in really bad shape. We managed to move it into a more stable, better country in part. I mean, it was led by Colombians, but the United States invested heavily. There've got to be things we can do to help strengthen and stabilize these three countries, which if we don't do, people are going to keep coming. But there's also got to be things we can do to our system so that folks aren't waiting 3 years for an immigration hearing. And Senator Langford keeps proposing revisions to the law that some of us in the Democratic Party need to be willing to look hard at, because it is a broken system that does not treat people fairly or well. Sir.
All right, under the UN treaty, they reach the same country, the person they reach.
Right.
Yes, they want asylum. They turned it down. They are not entitled. They are not entitled to asylum here because they were already given a chance to take asylum in another country. They refused it and kept on coming here. There needs to be more investigation on that, and there needs to be a better system. You're right about opening up our facilities and expanding them in these other countries for them to go to. There are people that should be, and there are people that shouldn't be. It's the hardest part, and you and I both know that it's a tough job to actually straighten that out, but it doesn't need to be here in the U.S. done with. It needs to be dealt with back there. Because, as you know, between the drug cartels, the racketeering and stuff with the money flowing across, the drugs flowing across, and then the sex trafficking, it presents a lot of problems. I know your office is working with a bunch of people trying to straighten it out. I was just wondering if you could do more to help some of this situation. Because when we're taking these people in our country, it's causing more burden here than if we did it there. We need to accelerate or speed up the process of doing it over there. And I know you're thinking about better ways of doing it. So,
the challenge here is negotiating something that can pass the Congress and the president will sign, that expedites the process, that invests more, and that frankly has a real chance of working. We've got a lot of fact patterns, but I'll tell you, every time you see a horrific, heartbreaking fact on one TV channel, you will see an almost identical horrific and heartbreaking fact on another TV channel. You know which ones I'm talking about. Where on this one, every day, all day, it's about how illegal immigrants have murdered some wonderful, innocent American. And here, every day, it's how some, desperate single mom with 2 kids was fleeing violence and poverty and was doing the best she could to get to a safe country. The reality is complex. It is both. It is both. We have I have met the parents of children who were murdered by illegal immigrants. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying this doesn't happen. It's happening. But I also meet people who are here, who are immigrants, who are incredible and wonderful and contributing in great parts of our society. Both are true. I've met people who are scamming the system. They're making up stories. They don't really belong here. They didn't really suffer the stuff they're saying. I've also met people who have suffered horrible indignities, who have been deprived and tortured and beaten in other parts of the world and came here seeking asylum and have a legitimate claim. I've handled asylum claims in the past as a volunteer lawyer decades ago. There's both. There's people scamming the system, and there's people with legitimate claims. The challenge is to find solutions in the middle that sort out folks who really have a legitimate claim to be here and folks who are really going to contribute to our society, and push back or get out the folks who are scammers and the folks who frankly aren't doing the right thing once they get here. And that's hard if all we do is listen to this story or this story and not both. We got to recognize this is complex and we have a lot of people suffering, a lot. We have a really broken immigration system. Healthcare and prescription drug costs, opioids, and immigration are the 3 things that have got people really ticked off, and where we got to do better by you. You need an answer out of us. And I've been there 9 years. I've moved 5 or 6 bills on immigration. Not one of them has become law. Not one. Stuff we can get through the Senate, we can't get through the House. Stuff that got through the House can't get through the Senate. The president will sign it. The next president won't sign it. We are in a world of hurt about it. So I just encourage you to listen to the other side of the argument. If all you watch is MSNBC, take an hour and watch Fox. Trust me, it's educational. If all you watch is Fox, take an hour and watch MSNBC. Then turn them both off. Turn the crap off.
Thank you, sir.
And go talk to your neighbor.
And watch
Sorry.
6 ABC.
And watch 6 ABC.
Action news.
I understand there are some students from the University of Delaware here. Is that correct? Are they still here? I was wondering,
Okay.
do any of you have a question you'd like to ask? Please, yeah, stand up.
Not about a specific issue, but more of a process question. Often we hear about issues that maybe pass the House or that there is large support in the Senate for that never receive a vote. That is a decision of one particular member of the Senate. I was wondering how senators continue to work through facing those issues, whether it also frustrates your colleagues across the aisle, and what you do personally to keep working in the face that you know your bills might never see a vote. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for the question. On Thursday, a guy named Todd Young, Marine, conservative Republican, senator from Indiana. We're on foreign relations together. Todd texts me, "You willing to take up with Schumer, Kip Thorne?" There's a guy who's been nominated by President Trump to be the ambassador to the World Food Organization in Rome. This is the world organization responsible for dealing with famine. We haven't had an American ambassador there, I forget how long, year and a half, let's say. This guy just came through our committee. Sure, Todd, happy to do it. I go buttonhole Schumer. He hasn't heard of it, doesn't know what I'm talking about, scribbles it down. Todd goes and talks to Mitch McConnell. Mitch, you willing to let this thing go, right? The two of us ended up having to text each other, call each other, and talk to Mitch and Chuck's chiefs of staff and Mitch and Chuck's floor staff 3 times to get him out of committee, to get him out of the floor, and to get him confirmed. Sometimes it's just inertia. There was one member who I need not name in the other party who had a hold on this ambassador for no reason. His staff had just held him because they hold everything. This particular senator has held several of my bills. And when I go approach him politely and say, I'd really be interested in hearing why you're blocking my bill from being, he's released him. But that's just, in the Senate, any one senator can hold anything, any nomination, any bill for a period of time. And it forces you to go talk to him. Fortunately, this particular guy, I'm a co-sponsor of several of his bills. He is one of the most conservative Republicans. How do I get stuff done was your question. Sometimes you just got to be persistent and polite and hopeful. On the other hand, I've got a bill on funding renewable energy, the one I mentioned earlier that Lisa Murkowski's, I have 5 Republican co-sponsors. It's a really good bill. It's an all-of-the-above energy solution that would strengthen renewables. Paul Ryan killed it 2 Congresses in a row. Just him. Just him. Our lead sponsor in the House was a conservative Republican from Houston who liked the bill. It is maddening sometimes when the leader of one party or the other party, one caucus or the other, just sits there and, kills stuff. And that's a bipartisan thing. I mean, you've got stuff, right? When the Republicans controlled the House and the Democrats controlled the Senate, I had House member friends who'd call me up and say, is there any way you can get Harry Reid to let my bill through? And I'd go talk to Harry and he'd say, nope. Now it's the other way around. We've got House members like Lisa Blunt Rochester in the House who gets a bill through and says, can you talk to Mitch and see if he'll let the bill through? And sometimes it's just nope. That's the partisan stuff that I find most frustrating. I hope you don't vote for people just because of their party. I hope you vote for them because of their principles and their attitude, right? And I hope you vote for people who are trying to solve problems, even if you don't like everything they do. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
Good to see the U of D in the house, right? You, gentleman
Fighting blue
with the hat back there, you had your hand up? Oh, you did? Okay, perfect. You, sir, in the middle, white shirt?
My name is Jason. I'm from Wilmington, Delaware. I have 2 very quick questions. My first is I was very disappointed that in the president's most recent budget proposal that he proposed cutting the National Endowment for the Arts and public television and the humanities. And I'm wondering, do you believe that is there a bipartisan coalition of senators who support funding the NEA, and do you think it's possible to save it in the next budget? And my second question is, it's kind of ironic that even though we live in a capitalistic society, it seems like consumers don't have many choices. It's frustrating to me that in Delaware we only have one insurance company on the individual marketplace, and in the airlines there aren't many choices. And when I lived in Baltimore, there was Comcast was the only person in town for cable. So what are things that the government can actually do to encourage competition so that consumers have more choices?
Jason, that was an excellent question. Two things. One of the best things about being on the Appropriations Committee is these hearings where the Secretary of Transportation or of Housing or of Energy comes in, or State. We just had the hearing with Secretary Pompeo. He gives his opening speech. And then the Republican chairman of the committee says, you're proposing a 30% cut to this, a 50% cut to this, and eliminating this, 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 and this. We're not doing that. That's dead on arrival. We're not going to do it. Thanks for coming. And then we start having a bipartisan conversation about what are we going to do in this year's bill. The odds that Big Bird is going to get killed are zero. Public television is popular. Public television serves a public purpose. And the National Endowment of the Arts and the National Endowment for Humanities are tiny programs in the context of a multi-trillion-dollar federal budget. They will survive. I was upset that the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is the best program federally to help small manufacturers, zero in the budget. High-intensity drug trafficking areas and the Office of National Drug Control Policy, 80% cut, all their functionality moved to DEA. The HIDA for Newcastle County would be zero. That's not going to happen. I can give you a list of 20 of these that are terrifying proposals, concerning proposals, try not to overstate it. Deeply concerning proposals. Defunding Food for Peace, which saves 3 million starving children's lives a year by buying surplus grain from American farmers. Zero. That's not going to happen. We are not going to eliminate these programs, and Republicans and Democrats in the Senate working together have managed to save these. We have a bigger problem. The president wanted to add $70 billion to defense spending in the last 2 years and cut 70 in non-defense and domestic spending. And so the Democrats said, yeah, no, let's not do that. Let's just spend both. And we ended up on a bipartisan basis passing bills that increased spending by 140 or 150 billion. Anybody see a problem here? Right. And we had the biggest tax cut in 30 years. So we now have skyrocketing deficits and a rapidly growing national debt. Now I'm listening to people say a national debt's not a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem. And we have to figure out a way that is balanced and sustainable to raise more revenue and reduce the rate of spending in the long term. In the short term, we're not getting rid of Big Bird. And I'm sorry, the second half of your question.
Choices with cable?
Choices with cable. Antitrust law. A century ago, there were these huge companies that controlled the railroads or oil and gas or coal. And Teddy Roosevelt cut his teeth as president on breaking up the trust. Antitrust laws like the Sherman and Clayton Antitrust Acts are over a century old. We do not have an active and effective antitrust section of the Department of Justice. I think we should be doing more to prevent monopolistic concentration in a few key areas. I am not at the point yet where I am willing to support breaking up things like Facebook and Google, to go back to a previous question, but they are huge and they have enormous market power. And I do think part of the point of having antitrust laws is to find ways to encourage competition, right? Capitalism works when there are open markets, minimal but responsible regulation, and like wide open competition. What bigger and bigger companies do is figure out how to take control of government regulatory activity to favor them and disfavor their opponents, and gradually get bigger and bigger to the point where they dominate and then they engage in monopolistic pricing. There's only a few cable providers in the whole country. There's a lot of the country where there's only one insurance company. That's not good for consumers. So this is an area that I've been active in and where I think we can and should be doing more, both legislatively and from a regulatory perspective.
Thank you, sir. Senator, we have time for 2 more questions. Let me get one over here. Ma'am, you in the center there, please? Yes?
Good evening. My name is Jennifer. I live in Newark, and I want to ask about your vote on the Born Alive Act. And just explain to me how you can rationalize after a woman is, even if you're pro-choice, and a woman has a botched abortion, the baby's born alive, that you're okay with killing it, And how do you just rationalize that in your mind and reconcile with the living God?
Jennifer, of course I'm not okay with killing that child. It is already illegal. It's already illegal. A law was passed several years ago, actually, I think it's 8 years ago, but I could get you the specific site if you want. Infanticide is illegal. If there is, to your fact pattern, if there's a botched abortion and a child survives, you cannot kill that child. It is against the law. So what was the point of Ben Sass introducing a bill that didn't have a hearing in committee, didn't have a markup, but that Mitch put straight on the floor? It was to create the false impression that somehow there is this rampant national problem with infanticide not being illegal. It's illegal. And should be, and is. And if there's any doubt in your mind that I think infanticide is and ought to be illegal, I welcome hearing from you further, because I know this is a very emotional issue. I have heard from quite a few close friends. So I hope you don't feel disrespected in my answer. I know this is a deeply personal and passionate issue. I am pro-choice. I am not someone who would encourage or endorse or support abortion in my immediate family, but I'm also never someone who's going to be asked to carry a child. And I don't feel comfortable using government power to criminalize women's choices about reproductive health.
Thank you, ma'am. One more question, and I have a quick question for you, Senator Coons, before we go. Yes, sir. You, right there.
Hold on to it. My name is Chris Shopfer from Wilmington. I'm a small business owner here, and I'd like to ask a question about the coming debate on health care. The Affordable Care Act was very difficult on our business, ultimately led us to cancel a health care plan that we had in place for 40 years and was a running nightmare for several years after that. And this is maybe akin to your MSNBC versus Fox News debate, is you have two sides to the story. One is let's make healthcare a government thing, and the other side is let's make it unfettered capitalism. And there's an economic reality that healthcare is a lot like the energy industry. There's some portions that should be heavily regulated, and there's some portions that really should be highly competitive and not regulated, but I see nobody talking about that kind of combined solution. The principle in economics is called elasticity of demand. I wonder if anybody ever talks to you about elasticity of demand, and if not, how has that principle completely missed this debate? Because right now it's just like a tennis match going back and forth, and I promise it will not get anywhere unless somebody considers that the real economic, the fundamental economics of the whole situation.
Thank you, Chris. One of the things, let me try not to give too long an answer. This is just a little story. I'm giving a speech, Senator Cassidy, Dr. Cassidy from Louisiana, he's a freshman Republican. I'm giving a speech about the Affordable Care Act. He's presiding. The way it works in the Senate, you're up there giving a speech by yourself. Nobody's paying attention. Except folks in the gallery, maybe sometimes folks watching at home. Although if you're watching my speeches on C-SPAN at home, I suggest you may need, Kobe is. Thank you, Kobe. Somebody. I know my mother-in-law is. So I'm giving a speech about the Affordable Care Act, and I go through the specific individual cases of 3 Delawareans I know whose lives were saved by the coverage they got through the Affordable Care Act. Cassidy's writing. And then I start talking about 3 small businesses I know where the business owners had to stop offering health insurance to their employees because they couldn't afford it anymore. The price went through the roof. His head comes up. He's looking at me. And I'm going through 3 specific, very difficult arguments, discussions I had with folks through the county chamber, through the state chamber, or a business I knew. And then he goes like this when I'm done. I come up, he goes, "You a Democrat?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He goes, "I just hear you say something bad about the Affordable Care Act." I said, "Yes, sir, you did." He goes, "What's that again?" I said, "It wasn't written by God. It was written by people, and it wasn't thoroughly vetted and improved. It has some obvious flaws. The small business tax credit was not large enough. The risk corridor payments were not made. Insurance in some states like ours, where you have high concentration of healthcare providers, went up insane amounts, 30% a year. This year it only went up 3%, the exchanges. But every other year it's gone up, 30%. And so folks who are well-intentioned employers who want to provide insurance to their employees got out. We need to find solutions to this. I recommend to you Mike Braun, a conservative Republican of Indiana, beat my dear friend Joe Donnelly. But Mike Braun had some comments today, I know, Politico, Washington Post. This is a Republican senator, where he said, I thought one of the most sensible things I've heard in a while. He said, we need to have a replacement plan as Republicans. If we're going to run on fully kill the Affordable Care Act, we have to have a viable plan to replace it. John McCain was not a liberal. That no vote, he told us it was because there was no credible replacement plan. And what I liked about what Mike had to say was, he said there's two features of the Affordable Care Act that are now kind of part of the fabric of our society, to your point about basic. If you have a pre-existing condition, you can't be denied access to health insurance. How many Delawareans, there's 900,000 of us, how many Delawareans have a pre-existing condition? 400,000. This isn't a handful of people, folks. And the way insurance used to work, this is a 10,000-foot course summary, but the way insurance used to work before the Affordable Care Act, 156 million Americans get their health insurance through their employer, right? Right? Everybody worked at DuPontville, right? And you had great health care until you needed it. And then you had a child who was severely challenged and was in the NICU for 6 weeks, and you come home and you get this notice saying you just busted through your lifetime cap. My what? Or you barely survive ovarian cancer and go back to work, and there's this letter that says, well, you have a pre-existing condition, you're not covered anymore. That's the way it used to work. And offices like mine, I wasn't in the Congress when the Affordable Care Act happened, but as county executive, I had people call me all the time who were driven into bankruptcy because they couldn't afford health insurance. But we've also come up with a system where the costs have grown so quickly, it is not affordable. Most of you are paying more for your out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs than you are for your hospitalization, but the hospitalization costs more than the drugs. That's nuts. We're sending very mixed signals to employers and employees, to manufacturers and inventors and entrepreneurs, to hospitals and to doctors. It is an incredibly complex system. I mean, I don't think I'm a ill-informed or uneducated guy, but I got to tell you, in 9 years, it is really hard to get your head around how to fix the federal healthcare system. Chris, I'm familiar with demand elasticity, but I'd be interested in how you believe, what solution to the federal healthcare system you think that necessarily implicates. I do not support nationalized healthcare, meaning one unitary national system where everybody who's got insurance through their private employer has to give it up. I just don't think that's going to succeed. But I do think we have to find ways to gradually make healthcare more accessible, more affordable, and higher quality. I have 4 bills I've co-sponsored to reduce prescription drug costs. That is a tough situation because we can't kill the innovation that is going to discover cures. Insight, you ever drive by Insight, the old Wanamaker building? You know how much they're spending on research this year? $1 billion. They invented a cure for an incredibly deadly form of cancer that before they discovered it was killing people by the tens of thousands. Now here's the problem. Guess how much that medicine costs? Tens of thousands, right? And our system just is not, we are not set up well and we are not designed right. There should be a floor that is required and mandatory, and then there should be intense competition above that. Everybody has to have health care. If you don't have good health, nothing else matters, right? And I think access to quality health care is a right. But making it affordable, making it individualized, and making it competitive is in keeping with our values as a capitalist society. We have to find a way to square this circle. Thank you for the question. I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry if I talked.
Thank you for all your questions. Final question.
Uh-oh.
And this may be as long or as short as the answer.
You watch 6 ABC News, yes.
Senator Chris Coons, what keeps you up at night?
There's a lot of things that keep me up at night. You know what keeps me up at night? You want a quick answer? You want a real answer?
Whatever you like.
What keeps me up at night is whether or not we know how special we are. Whether or not last night I spent last night with 3 families whose sons were killed in Afghanistan 4 days ago. These are Marines, Marine reservists who were supposed to come home in 3 weeks, and a fiance who could not stop crying, who was supposed to be marrying the corporal who was killed in a month. That keeps me up at night. Do we know what they're doing, and do we appreciate them and respect them? Do they need to be there? Are we doing right by them when they come home? Are we solving problems around the world with a hammer when we could solve them better with a combination of a hammer and an open hand? Are we increasing terrorism, or are we beating terrorism? We've spent $6 trillion since 9/11 on combating terrorism globally. And I deeply respect and am grateful for the men and women who have put their lives on the line and lost them in the fights we've asked them to go fight for us. But every member of Congress should have to stand on the flight line at Dover Air Force Base and listen to a newly widowed woman wail. It is horrible. And I'll tell you something. We are failing them when we so bitterly fight with each other that we shut down the government of the United States for 35 days over fence versus wall. The Chinese have a whole different way of developing their society in our world. And I'll tell you, I go to developing countries and they look at them and they look at us and they say, you know, I'm not sure your system is any better. Because they see us fight and fight and fight and fight with each other constantly. So what keeps me up at night is, do we know how special we are? Do we know how important the free press is? We shouldn't be calling the free press the enemy of the people. Do we know how special it is that you can go and stand in front of a judge and have confidence that it doesn't matter what's your race, what's your sex, what's your gender, how much money you've got? That judge should give you justice. We've got principles and hopes in this country that really are inspiring to our world. We fall short of them. We have. But the history of our country since its founding has gradually bent towards a more just, more inclusive, more positive, more hopeful. Why are there people all over the world trying to come here? You think China's got an illegal immigration problem? I don't think so. I think people from all over the world want to come here. And we ought to recognize how special we are, how hard people are fighting to defend it, make sure that we're doing right by them and that they need to be making this sacrifice, and then get over ourselves and fix the problems that we're not fixing. So if some of you see me compromise with a member of the other party, recognize part of what I'm trying to do is do right by those 3 families. Because those guys, when they enlisted, nobody asked them if they were Republican or Democrat. Nobody asked them if they liked Donald Trump or Barack Obama. They just asked them, are you willing to sign up and go wherever we need you and do whatever we ask you to? And they said yes. They signed a blank check up to and including their lives. And they lost their lives 3 days ago in an IED bombing for you. Are we doing right by them? Let's do right by them by respecting each other, listening to each other, and believing in our democracy again. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Coons, Senator from the state of Delaware. Thanks so much for coming, being involved in the process. I'm Matt O'Donnell. Good night. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks.